is everything so Why is it that GDP is rising, the stock market is doing better than it ever has, everywhere you look, line go up, economy go burr, but for some reason, you don't have enough money to pay your bills? Where is all the money going? Well, you are about to find out in this first part of a new series on why everything is so In this video, we're going to be looking at the reason that you have nothing, while literally like 5 unimaginably rich dudes appear to have, well, pretty much everything. Income inequality. Well, more specifically, wealth inequality.
Why don't you get a job?
But that doesn't alliterate or sound as good. In 1965, the typical American CEO made 21 times the salary of his company's average worker. In 2022, that CEO made 398 times the salary of his company's average worker. Not their lowest paid worker, their average worker. Joe in accounting.
Little kid lover.
Between 1978 and 2021, the average worker's pay rose by 18.1%. In that same time, CEO compensation increased 1,460%. So just a bit, just slightly more, teeny weeny little bit of a bigger increase there for them.
We need money to pay our hookers, okay?
This means that it would now take that average employee, Joe from accounting, more than a month to earn what his CEO earns in just 1 hour. But who knows, you know? Maybe that's just because the CEO is working 398 times harder than Joe in accounting, that disgusting slacker. It's definitely not because the CEO's dad was in the same dorm room as the guy who founded the company.
I know. You're a princess and I'm just a stable boy.
I would be insane, and nothing like that literally ever happens. And hey, maybe the CEOs just don't know that we're struggling. You know, maybe they might share if we just asked really nicely. Have we tried that yet? I don't think we tried that yet. But hey, do you know what's a great way to get your mind off the fact that you live in a crumbling capitalist hellscape in the middle of a hostile government takeover? 10 milligram THC gummies from today's sponsor, 5CBD. That's right, I said free Delta 9 THC gummies with a link in the description. Now, you might find this shocking and scandalous, but I used to smoke marijuana. Well, one day I decided my lungs, they're kind of important, it turns out, and I stopped damaging them with harmful smoke and started using edibles instead. And one of my favorites is 5CBD's high-potency THC gummies. These gummies each contain 10 milligrams of CBD and 10 milligrams of Delta 9 THC, the same kinds of THC that gets you buzzing from actual bud. 5CBD offers 3 different varieties for you to choose from. An uplifting sativa-like experience for getting shit done called Surge, Chill, which is like an OG indica for when you want to get couch-locked and loaded, and Vibes, a hybrid experience that's a nice middle ground between the two. All of 5's products are third-party, lab-tested, and certified, and about as natural, effective, and authentic as CBD products get. And the best part is when you click that link in the description, you can get a free sample pack from 5, just pay shipping. Must be 21 or over. You can't beat that deal. It's a free buzz, folks. It would literally be sacrilegious not to take a free buzz offer. Come on now. So click that link in the description and get your buzz on for free right now. And now back to more incredibly depressing information.
The United States is
home to more billionaires than any other country in the history of the world, with 735 publicly listed billionaires within its borders. We are then, as always, closely followed by the sleeping dragon of
China,
with 698 billionaires, and then India with 237, Germany with 136, and Russia with 117. And that's simply because both
China,
India each have over 1 billion people. Russia is full of a bunch of literal oligarchs that were given all the previously nationally controlled companies by their government buddies when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s.
Ramen! Are you sleeping, you fat? Come on!
And the Germans are all on meth analog research chemicals that they acquire from their velvet-filled techno dungeons. So they just generally have an unfair advantage. They're juicing, people. Those are performance-enhancing drugs. And in the past 5 years, these billionaires have even been keeping the rest of the puny 1% from sharing in their newly stolen spoils. There has been a massive shift in wealth straight to the top since the very uneventful year of our Lord 2020, with the wealth of the 5 richest men population more than doubling in that time, and billionaire wealth in general climbing to over $14 trillion, while the wealth of the rest of the 1% has actually remained relatively unchanged. That's correct, the billionaires are ripping off even the poor multi-millionaires now. Have they no mercy? But guys, what you don't understand is that these inconceivably, unimaginably, grotesquely rich people, they just need money way more than you do. I mean, they just have so much of it, and you're in debt. I mean, why else would they have just so much more money than you if they didn't clearly just need it like several billion times more than you, you know? I mean, you literally have like negative money, and you're still alive, mostly, right? So just by definition, it's been proven that you personally don't need money. You know, you're just built different.
I just can't do it. I just take the move, man.
But them, on the other hand, who knows? They might just have so little going on outside of being the richest people on the planet that if they were to suddenly be worth less than $1 billion, they might simply dissipate into a cloud of Thanos snap-esque dust. We just don't know what would happen in that situation. You know, we better just give them all of our money immediately. That seems like the safest course of action here, guys. But seriously, this wealth accumulation problem is getting so bad that certain private companies owned by our tech billionaire oligarch daddies are now worth more than the GDP of entire countries, nations of the world. Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia are each individually worth more than the entire GDP of the UK, France, Italy, Canada, South Korea, and actually every single other country on the planet other than the United States, China, Japan, Germany, and India. And if you were to combine just these three companies into their own country, let's call it Big Techistan, it would be the third richest country in the entire world at $10 trillion. I mean, it's gotten to the point that my good friends at the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, have started ordering the intelligence community to snuggle up to these corporations, who they euphemistically refer to as non-state entities. Non-state entities like Apple, for example.
We appreciate it very much, Tim Apple.
Who again, by itself, would be the 5th richest country in the world. This is all laid out in a fantastic article by Ken Klippenstein, which he very accurately titled, "Big Brother Becomes Little Brother, Corporations Are the New Nation State U.S. Intelligence Admits." In said article, the Clipster describes the newly signed Intelligence Community Directive 406, issued by the head of U.S. Intelligence, which orders spy agencies to, quote, expand and make routine their partnerships with private companies, and are even encouraged to incur, quote, risk to cement these relationships, which means favoring, quote, cooperation over security and loosening the restrictions for sharing classified information with the private companies. Kenneth calls this new class of tech-fueled broligarchs the apistocracy, which, of course, includes the modern-day robber baron billionaires who were given better seats than Trump's own cabinet during his inauguration. Men like Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel, the Zuck, and of course, richest man in the world and chief presidential puppet master, Elon Musk.
Go f*** yourself.
But although the prevailing theory is that these Steve Jobber barons are sucking up to power by sucking Trump for hours through symbolic acts like personally hand-delivering him checks for
$1 million.
at Mar-a-Lago under the assumption that eventually it will be Trump's turn to give them the reach around, Ken claims that in reality, it's not the ultra-wealthy, ultra-powerful, modern robber barons with their tech monopolies worth more than nation-states that need the government, it's the government that needs them. Which, can we talk about the $1 million checks thing for a second? What the f***? That's a thing that actually happened. Several billionaires like Peter Thiel and Mark Zuckerberg, the Zuck and whatnot, they went to Mar-a-Lago where the Trump lives, and they gave him a check for $1 million. What the f*** is that? You can't get more brazenly corrupt than that, right? That's like literally bringing a sack of money to the president of the United States and just giving it to him for no apparent reason, you know?
North of $500,000.
You just tried to bribe a federal officer.
No, technically I didn't bribe anybody.
No, that's not the
Technically, that's
conversation
no,
I
no,
heard.
no.
Like, how are the history books even gonna write about? I mean, they're just gonna write down exactly what happened. Jesus Christ, look at that. They just gave him $1 million. What did they think was going to happen? Yes, the only reason that the United States is the most wealthy nation in the world by a mile with its $25 trillion GDP is precisely because of these robber barons having companies worth more than entire countries within the United States. So, who really needs who here? And that is probably a very large reason why the real leader of the free world is currently an unelected South African autist who's literally doing a coup as we speak by hacking into the US Treasury and just deciding where the country's money goes.
There is a lot of gold in here.
Sure, take what you can carry.
And speaking of Elon Musk and money, whoo boy, is there some nerdy math boy to get into there. Like, forget entire companies having more money than nations. Just this one singular, allegedly human being who's on track to become the world's first trillionaire and is the exclusive member of the 0.000000001% is worth more than the GDP of 157 countries. And there are only 189 countries. Elon Musk has more money than the GDP of 83% of the world's countries. And I'm not even talking about what our dear leader, Emperor Daddy Donald, has affectionately referred to as whole countries. Elon Musk has more money than the GDP of Denmark, Finland, Portugal, Greece, and New Zealand. Let's take a look at some taint-rippingly disgusting demonstrations of Elon Musk's wealth from this video by Humphrey Yang, which, great video. And not trying to dog on you, man. You're doing the Lord's work here. But your name is funny. I just have to point that out. That is a funny name. It just is. You seem like a chill dude who does good work and has a very funny name. I don't know why I feel the need to do this. Let's move on. Also, this video was made in September of 2023, when the elongated muskrat only had a measly 248 billion Biden bucks, compared to current day of current year, when he is the proud hoarder of 402 billion United States Trump dollars. So, I will be updating the totals shown here to more accurately reflect the current level of that we all are.
This right here is a Toblerone chocolate. The height of one of these is about 1.05 inches tall.
Which is a very respectable length. Okay, guys, 1.05 inches, that's plenty. All right? You, it is. It is! How many Toblerones would we have to stack to get to the length of Elon Musk's penis? And now your mother's penis.
Let's pretend for a moment that the height of this Toblerone chocolate represents the median wealth of a household in the United States, or about $121,700.
Which is still a lot of I mean, do you have $121,700? How many Toblerones tall would your stack be? Let me know in the comments. Do the math. What fraction of a Toblerone are you at, folks? Me personally, it would literally be negative Toblerones tall, thanks to the IRS, okay? It would be Toblerones deep. Please support me on Patreon. Link in the description. I am so scared.
We can then start stacking Toblerones one on top of each other, just like so. So that means this stack of 3 would represent about $365,000 of total wealth. And if we kept stacking these Toblerones all the way up and up and up and up, how tall do you think we would have to stack these Toblerones to get to Elon Musk's wealth? Well, let me tell you, Elon Musk's net worth would stretch upwards all the way to the height of Mount Everest. Yeah, that's right, Mount Everest, 29,000 feet.
Wow, that's disgusting. Mount Everest? Picture that. Crazy. I'm sure it can't get any... Oh, it does get worse? Cool, love that.
But not just one Mount Everest, maybe 2 Mount Everest, you might say. Nope, not even 2 Mount Everests. The answer is 7 Mount Everests tall. You'd have to climb Everest 7 times to get the equivalent net worth of Elon Musk, where the median net worth was the height of this piece of chocolate.
Oh, and it gets worse again. Yippee! I'm loving this. This is great. That's because today, assumedly thanks to hyperinflated Tesla stock and billions of your own tax dollars going to him for electric vehicle and Pentagon grants, that number is now 1,214 Mount Everest tall. No, that cannot be right. Math isn't my thing, guys, okay? I'm good at doing crosswords and your mother, okay? And that's about it. I got my PhD in dick jokes with a minor in swagology. Let me carry the one.
What the is swag?
Swag? You gonna ask me what swag is?
It's more than 10 Mount Everests now, yes. I promise this time, guys. Here, check my work. And now for a more Minecraft-themed visualization that somehow makes me even more nauseous, take a look at this. No, not that. This. Take a look at this.
Now look at this.
Here's my favorite depiction of Elon Musk's wealth. Let's visualize it with this cube of $1 billion. It has a height of 45 feet, a width of 48 feet, and a length of 40 feet. This cube is already huge, but let's see how far Elon Musk's wealth literally stacks up to find out how much he has, because this level of wealth is still difficult to comprehend for any human brain. To do so, we'll lay the cubes horizontally across and then compare them to the global landmarks if they were laid down on their side. As we go through famous landmarks, we can see that we're passing the Eiffel Tower, which is about $21 billion worth of cash stacked high. In making this video, I unfortunately don't have a good solution on how to reduce wealth inequality. Hopefully shedding some light on the problem helps bring some awareness and that you appreciate this video. Our country's wealth is a double-edged sword. For those that can generate wealth, it's one of the greatest things imaginable. However, it does seem that the majority of people, if you're not born within that category of wealth, such as the top 1%, it is extremely hard to ascend to those ranks.
And again, that was when he had, like, half of the money that he does now. I even created my own little Elon-based money metric. If we were to take every single one of Elon's actual physical dollar bills, which I think would be impossible. Actually, I don't think that there is enough physical bills in existence to do that. Yep, no, not even close. Oh my God. But if there was enough bills to represent Elon's wealth, and we laid them side by side next to each other, they would stretch more than 39,150,252 miles, which would make it around the Earth 1,572 times, would go to the moon and back 164 times, but just like the owner of said bills, still couldn't quite take us to Mars. Which, by the way, whatever happened to that? Elon, can we go back to that whole thing, please? For the love of the sweet baby Jesus, could you just go back to us going to Mars, dog, instead of raiding the treasury and instating techno-feudalism with us being a bunch of Neuralink brain-chipped serfs, please? Like pretty please with a cherry on top.
Pretty please.
What? It would take the average American worker 6.4 million years to acquire as much wealth as Elon Musk, which I am told is a long time. Too long, I think. I think it's too long. When it comes to income and wealth inequality, it's a little shocking to see just how big a difference there is between what Americans think is going on versus the reality of the situation. For an amazing example of this, let's take a look at this video by Politizane from 2012, a year when it was Bill Gates who actually still was not the richest person in the world. That title actually belonged to a Mexican telecommunications mogul named Carlos Slim, whose name was definitely a bit of a Biggie Smalls kind of a situation, who was the proud owner of $69 billion.
Nice.
Which is, I'm told, quite a lot of money, apparently, but it's also a sharp contrast to current year's richest man and true winner of the last presidential election, Elon Musk, who didn't even crack the top 100 richest people in the world in 2012, but is now worth $408 billion and counting, which is, again, I'm told, slightly more than $69 billion. So clearly, a lot has changed on the inequality front in a little more than 12 years, and not like, you know, in a good way. So definitely keep that in mind. But the facts laid out in this video are still, to use the clinical term, rage-inducingly bad crazy. The video is based on a Harvard study that asked 5,000 Americans how they thought that the wealth was actually distributed in the United States, breaking the country up into 5 groups: the poorest 20%, richest 20%, and the 3 remaining 20% brackets in the middle. This is what the participants said that they thought that the wealth distribution actually looked like in America. They also asked these 5,000 people what they thought that the ideal distribution would look like, and 92% of these dirty, Lenin-loving commies said that this graph would be the ideal distribution of wealth in America. And these were people all over the political spectrum, very diverse group of 5,000 people, Democrats, Republicans.
Please save me. Please save me, Donald Trump, please.
This is what they chose. Now, I want you to take a second to look at each of these graphs and consider your own thoughts on the matter before I show you the reality of the situation. It's this. This is what it is. This is the graph. That's what it is. That's what it actually is. Look at this. You see this? These 2 little bars right here? Yeah, me neither. I know. That represents the amount of wealth that the bottom 40% of people, almost half of the entire country, have between them. It's negligible. It's a rounding error. You can barely see it on the graph.
Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have.
In fact, let's bump it up to 50%. If you took all of the wealth of the entire bottom half of Americans, everything they own, every penny, you would have to multiply it almost 14 times to equal the amount of wealth held by the top 0.1%. Not the top 1%. The top 0.1% have 14 times more wealth than half of all the people in the entire country combined. Do you see what that crazy freedom-hating socialist Bernie Sanders was on about now?
Change the world. My final message: free health potions for all.
And it wasn't always this bad. In 1978, the top 1% owned 20% of the nation's total wealth. Today, that number has basically doubled to almost 40%. The top 10% of Americans own 76% of all the wealth in the United States, while the bottom 50%, half of all Americans, fight over their collective ownership of 1% of all of our nation's wealth. We're going to be talking about a lot of numbers here, folks. It gets confusing, but that's right. Yes, 1 out of 10 people in the United States own 76 times more than the bottom half of our country combined. But what about the so-called middle class? I mean, certainly they're somewhere in the middle, right? Well, the bottom 80% of Americans, which would by definition include the middle class, share only 7% of the nation's wealth. And that top 1% I keep talking about, they own more than the bottom 90% combined. And it's not even particularly close, with that top percent, again, having 40% of the wealth, while 9 out of every 10 Americans only hold 26% between them.
And a lot of that money gets passed on to their children or their children's children. Take the heirs of Sam Walton, founder of Walmart. None of them founded Walmart. None of them were created equal either. The 6 of them have more than $140 billion in wealth. That makes those 6 people wealthier than the bottom 40% of Americans combined.
That's correct. These 6 silver spoon in the mouth having, trust fund huffing Nepo babies were simply given, not earned, given more money than every penny owned by 40% of Americans, or roughly 133 million people. But to be fair, as we could see from that graph of wealth distribution earlier, or not see on the graph to put it more accurately, that isn't actually that much wealth at all in terms of the total amount in the country. But all these numbers and graphs and math boy nerd, all right, what does all of this actually mean? Well, essentially, it means you're
Our conclusion, essentially, is that you're just absolutely round. Like 6 Ways to Sunday, we used an advanced regression model to find that you are either totally, entirely, or marginally Any other non-f***ed scenario is statistically insignificant.
And back to the math boy nerd. Let's look at this whole situation from a different angle. Like they did in that first video that I showed about what Americans thought wealth inequality looked like. They reduced the total population of America into 100 people, lined them up poorest to richest, and color-coded them again based on what 20% wealth bracket that they fell into. They then took all the wealth in the United States and distributed it equally to everyone in the line.
Well, Eisenhower, yo, what's up? This Jacobo guy, he's making us pay minimum wages. Call me! Yeah, go get him, boy. Holy shit, you actually did it. That's her.
Now, this is what it would look like if all that wealth was distributed the way that those slimy, socialism-swiggin', Scandinavian system-suckling 92% of Americans thought it should be.
This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth.
And now this is what it would look like if how Americans thought that wealth was actually distributed was the reality.
Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans, and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class.
And lastly, the dystopian truth that is the actual wealth distribution in these great United States.
The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change, and the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
And this is all in terms of the United States, the wealthiest nation in the history of the world.
America is #1.
So don't even get me started on global inequality.
Who the are you talking to? I am getting a flight to England and I am coming to capture your family.
Because I don't want to. I don't want to get started on it, okay? Just know that it is way, way, way worse. And all of this data that I have just told you, while still f***ing horrific, doesn't even tell the full story of how we all actually are. That's because it leaves out a very special component that we've been seeing a lot of lately, an insidious force constantly running in the background, invisibly making you poorer, our old friend, inflation. And no, not the thing you're gooning to on your second monitor right now. I mean the economic principle, the thing that happens when the money machine go brr. Since 2020, the United States has printed a lot of money and also just added a bunch of mythical pixie dust number money into their giant Fed computer without even having to print any of it. The point being, they have poofed a lot of new wealth into existence in the last 5 years. And the vast majority of this new wealth has been funneled straight into the pockets of the 0.01%, with our billionaire robber baron daddies more than doubling their net worth since 2020 to the point where three men, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the Zuck, now have a combined $900 billion, or more than the bottom half of America. These three men have more money than 145 million people combined. And the fact that all this new money has gone to them and not to you has effectively made you even poorer, even if you have the exact same amount of money in your bank account that you did 5 years ago. Inflation is essentially a hidden tax on your money. Inflation goes up the more everything costs, and the less every individual dollar is worth. Let's say, very hypothetically, that you had $10,000 in the bank. Wouldn't that be nice, Jesus Christ, in the year 2000? So not a super long time ago. Now let's say you did not touch that shit the whole time, 25 years. You would still have $10,000 in said bank. So no difference, right? But here's the catch. Here's where the hidden tax of inflation comes in. Because even though the number is the same, $10,000, if you compare the purchasing power of that same amount of money from 2000 to 2025, basically the amount that money is actually worth, you now effectively only have $5,456 in that same bank account. So just by leaving that money sitting there, it's lost almost half of its value. Now, if there's one thing that rich people love doing, it's not paying taxes and drinking a Capri Sun full of baby blood while playing with their human chessboards, but also avoiding taxes. That's a big pastime for them. And the unwritten hidden tax of inflation is no exception. Rich people curb this hidden tax by taking the vast majority of their Scrooge McDuck-esque wealth and investing it into assets. An asset is any investment that grows in value or produces value over time. So it could be stocks, bonds, gold, crypto, technically, real estate, businesses. Rich people will buy pretty much anything to avoid their money effectively losing value by just remaining the same number that it already was. I mean, look at NFTs, dude. They will buy anything to do so. I mean, that was kind of a scam. So is crypto. It's more of them putting their money in so they can take your money, but that's a completely separate conversation in and of itself. And this means that while billionaires have doubled their net worth since 2020 because they own all of these assets, even if the money in your bank account has stayed the same, the value of that money is much, much less. It really was just a complete transfer of wealth from you to them, because the more wealth you add, the less yours is worth, but the more actual money there is to invest into assets, which inflates the worth of the shit that they already own, and therefore their pockets and not yours. It's kind of f***ed up. It's a little smart if that was the intention there, but it's incredibly f***ed up. Now, the top 1% own over half of the nation's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. In other words, the assets that actually grow in value, as opposed to your bank account, which decreases in value.
Ooh. That's kind of small.
While the bottom half of Americans hold a whopping 0.5% of these assets between them.
Kind of small.
Which means that this problem is only going to get worse. The poor peons like you and me that barely make enough money to pay the bills, let alone invest it in assets, will continue to lose money to inflation, while the people who already have the an extravagant level of wealth to spare some of it on things like rental properties and Dogecoin will beat inflation and continue to get richer, and the enormous chasm between rich asset-owning class and the poor working class in America will only continue to widen. It will just continue to spread endlessly, just like your mother's legs for me last night. And as things progress in the next few years, I really want you to ask yourself, particularly those who voted for the current president, what is more important to you? Not living in an end-stage capitalist hellscape controlled by an aristocratic oligarchy bent on turning you into a modern-day serf in a technological dystopia? Or removing the T from LGBT on all government websites and being allowed to say retard on Facebook? Just ponder on it. Give it some thought. It's a hard choice, I know. So now I think that all of you have a pretty good idea of how we are all f***ed. And next, I hope to show you why we got to be so f***ed, where all of this f***ing is leading us toward, and finally, what we could possibly do to not be so f***ed. Or at least how we can apply some lubrication. And speaking of the wealth gap, there's a huge gap between me and having wealth. I'm flat broke. Guys, I'm putting my Cash App and Venmo on the screen and e-begging. I really need some money. I do actually have negative money right now due to taxes and unfortunate things caused by a woman, as they often are. So if you could please just donate any amount of money to me from those, that would be really cool. I had to move out of my last place because it was too expensive and I literally ran out of money. So please help. Please and thank you. If you have the means in this terrible economy, please send me a couple of bucks. Really, it would be very much appreciated. And I also very much appreciate these special fellows, my God-tier patrons on Patreon. Revolver O, Totu, Marina, George W, Eric W, Cannoli Rose, Bim Wafty, James W, Cameron J, Operator Metro, Chase B, DeAndre M, the Duke of Earl, Shalom L, Arya and Calcifer, and Rena J. And of course, my 20 buckaroos. 5D Pizza, Tentoman, Lando Calzone, Snigowski, Trent S, Blarg, Al the Pal, Adam K, and Rare Bees. Thank you guys so much. And until next time, guys, keep it crispy. Try and stay alive out there. And I'll watch more of my videos, please. Watch more. Give me ad money at the very least, if you could. I'd be much. Please do it. Watch the video on screen. Watch it now.